When you get a dojo hybrid, it does come pre-rigged, but in the areas that I fish, we do get an awful lot of wahoo and Spanish mackerel or king mackerel with lots of teeth, so it's a good idea to actually rig them with wire, very much the same way that we rigged the marlin lures before. A hybrid really is constructed very much like a skirted lure. It's got the head and we've got a solid skirt, but there is an area inside just the back of the head where the crimp will jam to hold the rigs up or get started. To thread them up, get your leader, cut the end off it so it's nice and clean, but you don't want sharp edges when you're threading up a hybrid. You do want it to go in, so we'll just round off the edge quickly so it doesn't catch in there. Even lick it and push it through. Should go through easily enough, which it does, and pull the leader through the lure. Okay, at this end, we're going to put on crimp for nylon, push it through. Might be an idea to cut it off. Always use a pair of scissors, not pliers, because you do want a nice clean edge so it's easy to put through. Need a bit of chafing gear. In this case, we'll use a bit of nylon. Can be tight, not really all that important how big it is. Push it through, and we're just going to form a loop at this end. Push the leader through. Once again, we'll burn the end. That's a nice little round ball. Wait for it to cool again. Pull the tag in up to the crimp. Push the loop down to the tag end to make it easier to form the loop. And then pull the leader. And there we go, we've got a nice, easy loop. Going to crimp it once again, leave the end so it's flared. Start at the loop end. Crimp down. Same way twice. Once again, leaving a bit on the end to flare. Now make sure that the crimps are lined up with the holes. You really do want those holes to line up. Turn the crimp over so the crimp stays straight. Crimp again, and we're ready for this. Now we're going to put some wire through there. Put the wire crimp on. Once again, this is a Pakula heavy duty crimp, very strong. The size of the loop in this case doesn't matter. You can make it tight or you can make it loose. Here we're going to make it quite snug. Get the crimping pliers, put it right at the end. When we're crimping wire, we do start at the other end, so it will shrink that loop a bit. You can actually pull it through a bit tighter if you want. Crimp down. Once again, make sure the crimp fits in the grooves nice and evenly. Crimp down, right on the edge, and that crimp's done. What we're going to do now is pull the leader into the lure. Make sure it's nice and straight. Pull up so it's nice and tight. Give it a nice solid pull. And this will give us the position of our wire. Now, we'll mark it with a pen. Don't cut it. We'll just mark it with a pen. So that's where it comes out of the lure. Then we'll pull the wire out, like that. That's our mark. That's where we want the hook. That's the end of the stuff. We'll actually want the hook back a bit. We actually want the hook to sit halfway up that skirt. So that's the distance back that we want the hook to sit. So we'll just measure that. That's the distance there. We'll bend the wire so we can see the distance. Use a pair of pliers if you want. Okay, leave a bit for the crimp. About there. So we can actually cut it where it came out of the lure. Just below that mark. Once again, the big pliers so the wire's cut nice and neatly. Put that away. Put the crimp on. Hook. Put the wire in the crimp. Pull it up until that loop straightens out where we marked it. There we are. Put in the crimping pliers. Now make sure that you can see the wire here. It's come out a little bit, so we'll push it back in. That's better. Crimp down. Once again, crimp down. Now that's all. This is all the crimping finished on the wire. And what we'll do is now put a loop on the other end of the leader. Crimp on. Use the spring at the other end. Put through the crimp. Spring down to the tag end. Form the loop. Just in a bit. Let it flare once. Twice. Three times. There we go. Remember the trick of checking your rig. Hook through the leader loop. Take a couple of wraps. And give it a good pull to make sure you've crimped everything up. Okay, we're just about done. The hybrid rig doesn't need any heat shrink. This is the time to silicone everything. That crimp and the wire will remain inside the lure. After you've finished using it, it'll stay wet. So we silicone that up, silicone the hook. And while you're at it, we did these other lures before. So it's time to silicone these up as well. And also, while you're doing it, before you use the lure, silicone the skirts. And as long as you don't put them in detergent, those skirts will last a very long time. Silicone the lure, silicone the rig. Now the reason we didn't silicone these before is because the heat shrink wouldn't have stuck to it. The silicone would have just made the heat shrink slip straight off it. So that's all silicone now. That's now ready to be used, and that's ready to be used. Okay, back to the lure. Now one of the tricks with the hybrids is the hook has to remain up. The lure is keeled. It has a very large sinker inside the belly of the lure, a long way from the leader hole, so it actually is a very good keel. But for that to work, the hook point must remain up. And because the lure is soft and it is covered in silicone, the hook will move around a bit, and if it does, the lure may spin and be difficult to use. So all we do is we get a long rubber band, doesn't really matter how thick it is, we just bind it on until it's pretty level with the thickness of the eye as I have there. Now normally you've got the hook stuck in a rear lug, which is easier to tie. You don't really need to tie heavy knots in it. What happens is the plastic in the rubber band will react with the PVC of the lure. That'll make it quite sticky and the hook will stay in position. And you can trim those off quite tight. Now we've got to position the lure rig in the lure. Now once again, it's exactly the same as a trolling rig. The lure rig will sit inside the lure and the crimp will jam up inside the head, but you do have to line it up with the back. So we've got a clamp here. And what we'll do is slide the lure down. There's a hook point. We want the hook point up like that, and we need to line up the lure all the way down like that. Push the tail over the hook eye. The rubber band is now sitting in the tail, and we want the hook dead level with the lure, just like that. And that lure will now run incredibly easily, and that's the Dojo hybrid rig.